Welcome to our viewers. Thank you for joining us for a fireside chat today discussing bringing the workflow together and interview with StorageDNA. Joining us today is Erik Weaver. Welcome, Erik.
Hey, thank you so much, Jennifer. I'm Erik Weaver with the ETC. Today, we've got a special guest here with Dave and I. TC, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm TC, CEO of StorageDNA, and firstly, thank you for having me on this fireside chat. Excited to share more about what we're doing with you guys. So.
Cool. And Dave, want to reintroduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So David Phillips, Principal Architect for Media and Entertainment Solutions at Cloudian.
Thanks, Dave. And again, the point of the ETC here is to look around the corners, what's really important in the future. And object storage is absolutely important in building into your workflow in the future. And so we're taking a deeper dive. So as we take a look back at the key takeaways of the prior two webinars we had, the first one was talking about how it is practical for media entertainment. And what's so valuable here is basically that it's flexible, cost-effective, and scalable. These things are really critical for your key infrastructures. On the second talk, we talked about the economics of cloud or object storage. And in the economics, we were talking about how it stacks up against different tiers, including RAID-based systems, tape and archives of that sort, and cloud-based systems. So when you're building an overall strategy, you need to be looking at a lot of different things here. And what we're finding more and more is this is at the cornerstone of such a long-term strategy. So to go ahead and kind of just jump right into that, one of the things that we found very important is this concept of basically mobility and visibility. And visibility is really nowadays about understanding what you have and where you have it. And this gets really complex because in a traditional old system, you might have had a lot of control. Everything was on the same tier or a like-minded tier, but now we've got this sprawl problem that has occurred. Now you have cloud tiers, now you have different SANs and NASs in your environment, you have all kinds of different drives. So how do you begin to visualize that, understand what you have of that? So TC, how about we go ahead and jump just right into that? What's your opinion on some of those things?
Yeah, no, I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head with what we're seeing as one of the major challenges with data management with all our clients, right? Everybody's production and post pipeline is getting stretched, right? And what I mean by stretched is geographically stretched. We have, things being shot in one location, edited in another, color graded in another, archived in another, right? We're finding that, cloud's becoming an essential part of the conversation. And this happened before COVID-19, but has been accelerated through this time where a lot of clients we know are adopting post-production in the cloud. They're spinning up these virtual post-production environments in, cloud, ripping it back down. But the side effect of all of this is your data's everywhere. It's flowing up to the cloud, coming back down. And this nice, safe haven of your data where everything flowed into this one physical location, lived in there, and died in there is not true anymore. It's everywhere, right? So the need to have an engine that sort of gives you oversight of your content, your data, its security, its protection, no matter where it lives, has started to become an essential tool with pretty much every client we speak to.
Yeah. Dave, have you seen the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the kind of sprawl that you're talking about, I'm talking to customers and kind of my own experience with production and end users, is that it, a lot of times comes is a result of fear, right? So fear on the end user's part that if things get moved off to archive, how long is it going to take to get them back? And if it's 24 hours or more, then it's, I'm not going to make my deadline, so what happens is end users end up hoarding assets, making duplicates, making copies, maybe stashing some in their private Dropbox, which creates security issues. But, and then, you only have to have a couple users making copies, duplicates, where you start to fill up your primary storage. And then fear on the part of storage admins where, okay, the Isilon is 80% full, we're nearing capacity. What do we do? They end up, the only recourse oftentimes they have is like to buy another Isilon, to buy another primary tier 1 storage volume to, kind of make sure that production doesn't grind to a halt. So, they're kind of just acting on like, we're at capacity. What do we do? And I think the important part that you're talking about with visibility, is so key, because it's like knowing like where all the assets live, what tiers, all these storage silos that we've accumulated. How many copies, how many duplicates do we have? What's the real picture? And giving both the end users and the storage admin confidence that, hey, we know how many instances we have. We can delete this file. Like even if a user is using it in their project, we know that if it's stored on an active archive, object storage, we can get it back very quickly, and we don't have to have this, kind of, cycle of like storage sprawl, and making copies and kind of duplicating assets everywhere.
It's actually funny because I know of one post house in town, and they actually have an intern or a low-level person come in at 2 and 3 in the morning just to get it off a limited amount of space in their tier 1.
Right.
So that's their whole job, is to wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning and show up to do this. Yeah. So TC, maybe you can dig a little bit more into analytics. Now that you could potentially put visibility over things, how can analytics now come into play? And do you want to click the slides there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the most important things we're seeing when we sort of take a high-level notion of visibility to sort of the second level of depth is, how do you enable multi-site cloud analytics? Now, what does that mean? It essentially means that, when you look at any production post pipeline, broadcasters, pretty much any client, well, finding data is popping up everywhere, right? We're seeing it on, on-premise NAS and SAN storage. This could be, your Isilons, your EMCs, your Dells, your Nexus, or it could be data sitting in the cloud, right? I mean, and we know as soon as your data hits the cloud, the meter's on, right? So, you're spinning up a Nexus file system in the cloud or an Azure Files SMB share in the cloud while you're getting charged constantly. And we're also finding that hard drives, camera cards, and media is being pushed to end users, right? So how do you track all of this? And that's one of the things that we're doing, right, is indexing all of this information, right, on all of these different storage tiers, and then pulling it all into one consolidated central analytics platform. Now, we have a quick demo for you guys later, but what we want to highlight in this demo is our central analytics platform is built on Tableau. Now, Tableau is very well known in the BI, business intelligence world, as a BI tool. And we said, hey, why don't we take all of this great BI work or analytics work and apply it to data management in media. And you'll see how we've done this and how this starts to unlock some very, very interesting bits of information across your infrastructure. So if you guys want to play that quick demo, that would be great. So in this quick demo, we're going to show you how DNAFabric helps with visualization and analytics. So as you see in this dashboard, we can show you things like total storage, total spending, data created, total count. We also give you an idea of where your data is located. We give you heat maps on how much you're spending on what type of storage. We also give you data aging charts, so you can actually look at and see where your oldest data lives and how much storage is it taking. We can show you file size ranges by extension. We can show you how long it'll take to access your data, and we're also showing you exactly how much you're spending on your storage. Things like sizes by file extensions are included, and a number of key performance indicators are there, including how much storage is being utilized and where. Now, if you want to drill down, you can always press the filters tab. And when you filter, you now have the ability to actually select exactly which storage pool you want to take a deeper look at. So in this case, I'm going to look at just the DDN, apply the filter, and you'll see that all my charts now focus in only on the DDN storage. So this really allows me to now look at all my storage pools at one go, or drill down on specific storage pools as well.
So one thing I want to point out with this is when you get a layer of abstraction like this that allows you to look at the analytics of these different storage pools and environments, it now allows you to become much more efficient the way you're planning your structure. So now you can take an object storage and put it at kind of the heart of your key points of need, which again, as we talked about before, is going to be much more cost effective and much more durable and reliable, and give you real-time access. So these things are really critical in building a long-term strategy here. Dave, have you ever seen or played with any of this kind of stuff, or what's your thoughts on some of that?
Yeah, I think, number one, I think what's really important to distinguish about this, the DNAFabric platform is that it's not in line with your data pipeline. It's sitting off to the side and indexing all of these locations and silos in a kind of non-intrusive way, So, a lot of times, monolithic, MAMs, where they require that you ingest all of the assets, go through, their ingest pipeline, get entered into their database, can really kind of bog down workflow productions, and you don't have the speed and agility, that's basically the new normal of like production these days. You don't have time to upload everything into a centralized database. So being able to kind of have this decentralized index of everything in place. I think in the other, kind of tying off on what we were talking about earlier is that this visibility and the analytics allows you to right size your storage allocation, your storage budget. You're always going to need that tier one, highest performance, lowest latency storage for real-time ingest, real-time playback, all of those, real critical parts of the workflow. The other 80%, all the, unstructured data, all the assets, that go from, warm to cold, can all go off to a more cost-effective and scalable platform that's accessible everywhere, and that's where you need like an S3 API, an API-driven storage interface that allows you to essentially access this over the wide area network, over the internet, and not be tied into these kind of, network file protocol, storage silos that reside in, your central data center or in, in multiple data centers.
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing to what David said is, the fact that you now have decentralized data stores, when you think about long-term archiving, you in fact want to bring something that you can access in a centralized manner, right? Which is where object is becoming so essential because, for example, with Fabric, if you have data sitting in London and you want to archive it to your object store sitting in New York, you can do it very, very easily, right? And I think that's the flexibility that we're seeing in the future of bringing a centralized S3 API-based long-term storage tier to your pipeline and assisting with the archiving and the retrieval of data. So.
Awesome. So let's dig a little more into the weeds. So we've kind of looked at a high level with this from an analytics view. Let's dig into how you can directly work with things like stub tiering and explain what that might be.
Yeah, so this kind of ties into, again, numerous customer requests, right? And I think one of the big things we are addressing with a feature called stub link tiering is really the fact that when you have users that have their data archived or migrated to, a more opaque medium like tape, there is this certain, distrust of how am I going to bring my data back, right? Because, and David alluded to this earlier, because generally that process for the end user has been pick up the phone, talk to IT then, maybe takes a day, maybe more to bring all of that data back. And that's kind of, nerve-wracking for the user and their data, right? So what we attempted to do with StubLink, which is only possible with faster secondary tier storage. I'm talking about spinning disk, I'm talking about object. What we can do now is we can actually tier old data based on a policy, right? So IT can set that. It goes off to your secondary object storage. But the key here is that we're leaving a user-friendly stub link file behind. This is simply an HTML file, right? This can live on your primary storage, on any primary storage, your Nexus, pretty much anything. The user, when they come back and they see their data is gone, they don't see empty directories and no files, right? What they see is a smaller file that they can double click and then initiate a restore on their own, which comes back pretty quickly, right? There's no IT involved. As long as the credentials are set, users can request, single files back, directories back, entire projects back without IT ever being involved. And once again, this is all possible because of secondary object storage. So when you kind of, factor all of this in with the time that is spent by IT managing retrieves, and now that users can do it directly, I mean, there's a phenomenal amount of benefit with deploying object storage. And I think stub link theory really brings that workflow out for our end users.
Yeah, I've actually seen out there this traditional method, which you're talking about, where they're going to IT or they're going to some archivist of some sort. And it's kind of a tribal knowledge of where things are, right? Exactly. And the combination of an object storage and a tool like you kind of takes it to the next generation, because you can't really scale tribal knowledge. So these great people who've been in these organizations for 10, 15, 20, 25 years are now either beginning to retire or the beginning to get overwhelmed with the workload, because there's just so much content being produced nowadays. Dave, have you ever seen any of that as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's, look, it's even in today, 2020, I talk to customers on a regular basis who are still relying on a closet full of removable hard drives, 100 drives, 200 drives. And, best case, there's a FileMaker database that lists what's on each hard drive. But like you say, sometimes it's just an Excel spreadsheet or just, somebody's, the metadata enrichment is just in somebody's head about like, yeah, that's what it says on the spreadsheet, but I know that there's all this stuff in there. So that, like you say, that kind of tribal knowledge, it's just like, it's not scalable and sustainable. And especially if that closet is now locked in, because the office is, because of, public health policies, it's locked and you can't even get into the building. So having something that's essentially like remotely accessible, and can be just indexed in place, automated, and provide a self-service model. I mean, the whole industry is moving towards this self-service model, and people more, with cloud services, managed services, that's what people really expect, is just like, I go to a portal, I can, essentially, I don't have to interact with anybody, and in order to, gain access to assets.
So I think that's a really key term right there, gain access, or having kind of this S3 kind of cloud-based interface to gain access. So TC, maybe you could jump into a little bit towards the remote shared spaces and how that would kind of empower in this new COVID-esque era of needing to be logging in remote.
Yeah, the other thing when you traditionally talk about object, we've generally, all our conversations, even in this presentation, has been around backup and archive and protection, right? Which are very, very essential. Don't get me wrong. I mean, protecting your data is, A1 important, right? But what we're seeing is that an object store, if you kind of, look a little bit deeper, it's got an HTTP-based, its primary interface has been designed for HTTP, which means it's globally accessible, right? Now, if you're going to step back and you look at what you need to do to share data, well, you need some big storage engine with a remote access on it. And it's traditionally been FTP, and it's traditionally been, UDP accelerated servers, right? But we find that an object interface, an object store with HTTP, can start to become a very, very critical piece of enabling multiple users, editors, artists who are trying to now share data remotely, right? And what we've done with remote shared workspaces is we've built a very efficient media intelligent data synchronization engine, right? So if you see the diagram we have on the screen right now, remote shared workspaces can tie together central storage like a Nexus. We can tie home editors, we can tie remote colorists, we can tie cloud editors, and we cache all the data being synced to these endpoints in a central object cache, like Cloudian, right? So if changes are made at one end, it's transparently distributed to all the others, and it's done through the cache in the middle, and that's what makes it easy, actually, right? We're handling things like project and bin lock. We're handling things like project versioning, and we're integrating shared workspaces deep into these applications. We've got it working with Media Composer, Pro Tools, Premiere, DaVinci, which is really cool because essentially what this object cache that you see in this diagram is serving as, think of it as your wide area central shared storage, right? So you had your NAS or SAN on your local area network. What are you going to replace that with as you move to a wide area workflow? And we see that as object cache, right? So object cache, in our opinion, is great backup and archive, but we feel it's becoming critical for remote collaboration as well now. And we're actually doing it. We have clients using it, and it's bringing a new paradigm to remote collaboration in the industry now. So.
Cool. And Dave, have you seen any of this kind of paradigm shift?
Yeah, well, obviously everybody's trying to solve this problem of like, how do I work, how do my distributed teams who now can't get into the office and access our central SAN, our central NAS, how do they collaborate and get access to those, the assets that they were up to like, a month before working with every day. And, as we've talked about in, kind of our previous webinars, it's just physically not possible to lift and shift, the SAN or, the NAS up into a hosted service like Dropbox, Box, Google Drive, or whatever. It's just, number one, it's just not the right place for storing that kind of assets, and it's not made for, petabyte level media libraries, media collections, because, you talk about just episodic television, several seasons in, you basically want to have access to all of that media library from past seasons and everything like that. It's not just a lift and shift situation. And as we've talked about in previous webinars, people are like, okay, well, we're going to VPN into our SAN and NAS, and we'll try to work that way. It's just not designed for that, high latency connection over their internet service provider. And everybody's operating with a different ISP. You've got some people who've got, fast fiber connections, but some people, in remote locations, their internet is just not up to that. And that's where having something that's inherently designed for, wide area access, that it's tolerant to this high latency packet lossy networks, that essentially is, the state of broadband internet in the country.
So I kind of like to say, in conclusion to kind of the series here, what you're going to see is an overall trend of SAN and NAS shrinking, and object/cloud growing on one side, and NVMe and faster tier 1 storage growing on the other side. And it's going to be shrinking again, some of those traditional technologies. And this is really important to pay attention to and follow the trends in, because with the volume and size and velocity of the data coming at you, you really have to act fast, but you have to be able to keep it secure and stable and cost effective and accessible at the same time. So I really appreciate everyone coming together on these three talks, and maybe we could open it to questions.
Perfect. Yes. Excellent. I would like to thank Erik, TC, and David for their time today, and for our audience for joining us as well. We do have some time for questions, so please be sure to enter them in the tab at the bottom if you haven't already done so. We do have a few that have already been placed in, so we're going to start with the first question. The question is, can DNAFabric handle tasks such as backup and disaster recovery?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think one of the things that we do very, very efficiently is taking your data, no matter where it lives, and seamlessly replicating it to an object store of your choice. And some of the interesting things that we're doing is we're making replica copies, we're preserving folder structures, we're keeping files native, and this is all so that you are not locked into a product, right? We have tons and tons of clients who are tired of being locked into a format on your target storage. And what we're saying is, no, it should be a democracy. You should have open access to your content. And that's what we're doing, right? So backup and archive is definitely a key area where we can help our users.
Perfect, thank you. We do another question. Which applications are remote shared workspaces integrated with?
So good question. Right now we have Media Composer, we have Premiere. In fact, we are releasing a tight integration with Premiere Productions, and we'll have Pro Tools and DaVinci Resolve shortly available after that. So our idea is to keep growing this list of application support in remote shared workspaces over the next few months.
Perfect, thank you. And then another question. How does DNAFabric compare to file sharing platforms like Cygnion and Aspera?
Another really good question. I think Cygnion and Aspera are great platforms, great products. They ushered in an FTP replacement solution, and really brought about efficient file transfers. And what I think UDP acceleration solutions did to FTP, we're sort of ushering in the next era where you can now assume that file acceleration is going to happen, right? Everybody needs it. It's a standard. But what's next is how do you collaborate, right? Now, if you've got editors who are working on projects and bin files across the world, well, it's not enough to just manually send those files, even though it's going really fast. Well, how do you ensure they don't step on one another? How do you take that manual process out of there? How do you make sure Avid or Adobe Premiere doesn't freak out as you're syncing all this data? And I think that's sort of where we come in and bring in a new level of collaboration on a wide area network.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Excellent. I'd like to thank Erik, TC, and David for their time today, and to our audience for joining us. This is going to conclude the discussion on bringing the workflow together, an interview with StorageDNA. If you have any remaining questions, please be sure to reach out to David. You can reach him at dphillips@cloudian.com, and we'll be happy to address those. And the rest of our speakers' information is up there as well if you'd like to reach out. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.